What up? What's up, fellas? Where y'all going?
You say their name, say Chambers are looking for you, hey, they gone, they running, they be scared. You know? They will kill you in a minute with no hesitation.
New Jack City is no doubt a cult classic. People still talk about Wesley Snipes as Nino Brown like he was that guy. But let's be real, no matter how raw that movie was, it didn't even come close to showing how savage the real story got. The film only gave a tiny glimpse. The real crew behind the story? The Chambers brothers. They were way more ruthless than anything Hollywood dared to show. These weren't your typical corner boys. The Chambers brothers came through like a storm. While most old school dealers were scared of crack, thinking it was too messy, too dangerous, these brothers ran straight into the fire and thrived in it. They didn't just make money, they flipped the whole Detroit scene upside down. At their peak, these dudes were pulling in a mind-blowing $250 million a year. And the wildest part? They came from nothing. We're talking about straight-up struggle. Mariana, Arkansas type of poor. Life out there wasn't just rough. It was brutal.
It was just like, I'm done. I'm not going in this field no more, chopping no kites for nobody. You know what I'm saying now? And just took off. By him not having a game plan, just looking at his criminal record, he was doing a lot of break-ins at that time to survive.
Picture 16 people packed into a tiny beat-up cabin. No space, barely any food, and zero comfort. That was their normal. Born into poverty, raised just trying to make it through the day. And all of that in a place where racism wasn't hiding. It was loud and proud. Confederate flags waving, hate on full display, and a system set up to crush any chance at success for black families. In a world like that, there was no backup plan, no help. If something went down, it was all on you. Back in the day, the Chambers brothers weren't the kind to just sit around and let life run them over. They learned real quick that nothing in this world gets handed to you. You gotta take it. Even as little kids, they were already out there making moves. Picture them at the family's juke joint, stealing wallets right under folks' noses and hustling grown men at the pool table, standing on wooden crates just to see over the edge. Their family even ran a club down there, so they grew up watching the game from the inside. Most kids in their situation would have just given up, seen it as a dead end. But not Larry, Wiley, BJ, and Otis. Nah, for them, that struggle lit a fire. It wasn't a setback, it was motivation to level all the way up. Larry, the oldest, was the muscle. Just standing next to him had people thinking twice.
In many places, the crack trade has transformed small-time hoodlums into big-time entrepreneurs. Among the most remarkable examples is the notorious Chambers Brothers gang of Detroit. Authorities say the Chambers brothers who made this home video didn't even bother to count the $1 bills because it took too long.
Should we throw these ones away, man, since we got $500,000?
Well, I tell you what we can do. We can give it to the poor.
Then you had Wiley. He tried to stay clean for a while. Did time in the military, even delivered mail. But the streets kept calling, and eventually he answered. BJ, he was the smooth one, the kind of guy who could talk circles around anybody, slick with his words, sharp with his moves, and always knew how to play it cool. Otis, the youngest, was hungry to prove he could hang with his older brothers, and together, they had that unshakable bond. They weren't the biggest crew out there, but when they walked into a room, everybody knew who ran the place. Now Larry, he was a whole different breed, straight outlaw vibes. He didn't believe in following rules, especially ones made to keep him down. While the others tested out normal jobs for a bit, Larry dove headfirst into the street game. No hesitation. He lived for the adrenaline, that danger, that rush, doing what others were too scared to even think about. That's what had Larry hooked from the jump. And yeah, it caught up to him. One Christmas Eve, Larry tried to pull off a job, but it went all the way left. He got jammed up and thrown behind bars. For most folks, that would have been the final chapter. But not Larry. Just 1 week later, on New Year's Eve, this man pulled off a prison break like something out of a movie. But he didn't lay low. Nope. He went straight back to the streets and started hitting up jewelry stores like nothing ever happened. That kind of heat doesn't stay quiet for long. The cops were on him quick, and this time they weren't playing. They slapped him with 40 years. But even locked up, Larry wasn't built to sit still. He escaped again. Not once, multiple times. Each time, same fire in his eyes. He was wild, untouchable. But even the wildest flames burn out eventually. After one last takedown, it looked like the ride was over. But then, boom, out of nowhere, the state Supreme Court flipped his whole case.
Deliver the drugs to gang salesmen at more than 500 crack houses. They use violence and intimidation to discourage competitors and to keep...
Just like that, Larry was back on the streets, a free man. He tried to chill, really did. Went back home, tried to keep it clean, but some habits, they're deep. It didn't take long before he was right back to robbing spots. This time, someone close flipped on him. Betrayed by someone he thought had his back. Locked up again, but something shifted. That second round behind bars hit different. The wildness didn't disappear. It transformed. Larry swapped the chaos for clarity. He started practicing yoga, meditation, real inner peace vibes. Like he finally realized he didn't need the streets to feel alive anymore. Larry got locked in, but mentally, he leveled up. The same man who used to bust out of prisons was now running things inside them. He flipped the script completely. No longer just a menace, Larry turned into a leader. Other inmates started looking up to him. That brain that once plotted high-stakes heists was now crafting bigger visions. Something with purpose, something that mattered. But while Larry was transforming behind bars, things outside were shifting too.
He ran away.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I bet you he ran away at the age of 15 to the young lady house that I had met in Detroit.
You never really been around drugs?
No.
Things of that nature. So how did you get introduced to the drug game?
Well, the young lady that I had came and stayed with, her moms and their family was...
Billy Joe Chambers and the rest of the crew were trying to leave that old life in Arkansas behind. Farming wasn't cutting it anymore. Could barely keep food on the table. So Billy Joe made a big move. Detroit. He went chasing a better life, a real shot at something more. At first, it looked like he found it. He dipped into the marijuana scene, made some money, got a little taste of the good life. But here's the thing, success, it's addictive. And once you get a whiff, you want more. Then crack hit the streets, and it changed everything. Billy Joe didn't just jump in wild, he moved smart. He sat back, watched, learned. What he saw was insane. Fast stacks, sky-high demand, barely any supply. The game had flipped, and crack was running the show. With a little help from a family friend who opened the right doors, Billy Joe and his brothers stepped in, and they didn't tiptoe. They made power moves while the old-school dealers were too scared to touch crack. See, the Chambers brothers? They thrived in chaos. They weren't tied to Detroit's usual crime circles either, and that was their secret weapon. Nobody was ready for them. They slid in under the radar and changed the whole game before anyone even knew what hit them. Just some country boys from Arkansas. That's what people thought, until they weren't. The Chambers brothers built a crack empire that turned into a full-blown machine. This thing moved fast, grew even faster, and left a trail of destruction behind like a tornado tearing through the city. BJ was the mastermind behind it all. He flipped a simple car wash and a regular-looking corner store into full-blown drug hubs, highly organized, smooth-running, and low-key enough to avoid attention. On the outside, everything looked clean, but behind those doors, crack and weed were moving non-stop, flying off the shelves like candy in a corner shop. BJ's plug, Big Terry Colbert, made sure the product kept coming in steady.
What do you feel like the most y'all ever brought in a day?
Well, we had got to a point where we was making at least $250,000 per day, every day.
Damn.
Manpower. Word started spreading back in Arkansas, fast. People heard about Detroit being the land of quick money, and all you had to do was get in with the Chambers crew. That's when the wave hit. Over 300 people from their hometown and nearby towns packed up and headed north, chasing that street gold. It turned from a small-time hustle into a full-on drug dynasty, and BJ was right at the center of it all. He might have been just 5'5", but when he talked, everyone listened. He wasn't just moving weight, he was running strategy. BJ saw crack not just as a drug, but as a money-making machine. And business? Oh, it was booming. Between 1983 and 1988, The Chambers brothers were operating an estimated 300 crack houses across Detroit, raking in up to $250,000 a day. That's not a crew. That's an underground empire. The Chambers brothers didn't just hustle. They ran the drug game like it was corporate America. This wasn't sloppy street dealing. Nah, they had structure, real structure. Workers followed strict rules. There was a clear chain of command, and they even pulled off wild marketing tricks. 2-for-1 specials, loyalty discounts, all that. If you were broke and chasing a high, they had a deal ready for you. It was drug dealing dressed up like a business plan. While the brothers were living large, rolling through the city in flashy whips, iced out in gold, rocking head-to-toe designer, their customers were breaking down. Whole neighborhoods under their grip started falling apart.
Sit your $5 down before I make change.
Addiction, violence, hopelessness. It all came with the territory they controlled. At first, people might have seen them as the underdogs, the scrappy ones who beat the system. But it didn't take long to realize they weren't the heroes. They were kings sitting on a throne made of chaos. Their empire was big, but the streets underneath were bleeding out. Then came 1986 and heartbreak. Their youngest brother, Little Joe, passed away, and his funeral, it was loud, lavish. The kind of send-off that practically screamed drug money. Limousines, custom designer suits, everything top shelf. A dramatic final goodbye. But after laying Little Joe to rest, the Chambers brothers didn't slow down. They came back to Detroit with even more recruits and a hunger that was colder than ever. They wanted more power, more money, more reach. Only problem? They had become too big, too flashy, too loud. They couldn't move in silence anymore. The feds were watching everything, every car, every call, every move. The game had changed, and the heat was rising fast. And this is where the empire started crashing down. What ended the Chambers brothers' reign wasn't some slick, high-level DEA bust. It was their own ego. The downfall kicked off when Larry's ex, Patricia Middleton, flipped on them. She gave law enforcement the whole playbook, everything. How the operation worked, who did what, where the money flowed. Total blueprint. But even with that inside info, the feds still might have taken longer to shut it all down if it weren't for one fatal mistake. Larry and his right-hand man, Jack Frost Jackson, got way too cocky. They started recording themselves on camera, counting stacks of cash like it was a music video, showing off ice, flexing inside homes that looked like mini mansions. It was next-level bragging, and it came back to bite hard. They thought they were untouchable, but those tapes, straight gold for the prosecution. The brothers basically filmed their own takedown and didn't even realize it. By the time 1992 hit, the lights went out on the Chambers empire. Streets that once buzzed with talk of their power fell silent. The feds weren't just watching anymore. They were storming in, doors kicked down, indictments flying. BJ and Otis got scooped up fast. Willie tried to play it low, still rocking his postal service uniform like nothing was going on. But they caught him too. Larry had already been locked up, but now? He was the main name on the indictment. He wasn't just doing time anymore. He was the face of the whole case. And when the cops raided their spots, they found about $1 million in cold cash and so much jewelry, it would make a rapper look broke.
Willie was kind of known as the one that was kind of getting in trouble in and out of jail. Like,
that was Larry. That was my oldest brother.
Okay,
they called Larry Marlowe.
The empire they built so boldly came crashing down just as loud. Now stack this on top. 68 cars, over 250 firearms, and another $500,000 hidden in a different part of the empire. All in all, the feds walked off with 41 luxury whips. Yeah, 41. It was a major haul. Detroit Police Chief William Hart stepped up to the mic, proud and loud, calling it a huge win in the so-called war on drugs. But here's the twist. Hart himself got busted not long after. Turns out he was skimming off the top, embezzling a slick $2 million from the department. And guess what? He ended up doing 10 years behind bars. Wild how the line between cops and criminals started to blur. Flashback to October 1988. That's when the Chambers brothers' trial kicked off. It wasn't just them either. 10 of their closest crew got hit with heavy charges. Conspiracy, drug trafficking, even tax evasion. The courtroom was packed and jaws were hitting the floor. But what really had folks stunned were the witness statements. These weren't just stories, they were straight-up horror tales. People said Chambers enforcers were tossing folks out of windows, crushing hands for sneaking a sample. It wasn't just a drug ring, it was a machine of fear. Some witnesses got scared off. Others disappeared completely. But by then, it didn't matter. The case was locked in. The walls were closing fast. And right in the middle of all this chaos, the family got hit with another tragedy. David, the eldest Chambers brother, passed away from AIDS complications in 1987. Just a few months later, the indictments dropped like bombs. Larry got picked up again, and that was the final domino. The dynasty that once ruled Detroit's streets started to crack for good. For all the fly outfits, fast money, and flashy rides, it didn't end in glory. It ended real. All four brothers landed behind bars. Larry and BJ took the biggest hits, both smacked with that kingpin charge. That's the Fed's ultimate hammer, reserved for top-tier bosses. Larry got life. BJ? He was staring down 50 years. Willie caught 21, and Otis walked away with 27.
Real hard bad. Racism was a real hard bad. Even at one time, one of my brothers was walking up the road. I'm in a little small town called Lee Grange, Arkansas.
But Yarda, the story still wasn't over. Willie got out in 2007 after spending nearly 20 years behind bars. BJ? He caught a lucky break. His kingpin charge got tossed in 91, which shaved down his sentence to 27 years. He ended up serving 23 and walked out in July 2010, 48 years old, stepping into a world that had moved on. The streets didn't remember the Chambers name like they used to. The game had changed. The blocks had new kings, new rules. That throne they once owned, long gone. The money was either spent or seized. The cars, gone. The fear they once sparked in people. It faded into whispers. All that remained were old legends, floating through the city like smoke in a dim, half-lit room. People still talk about them, but mostly about Larry. He's still locked up deep into his 60s now, the last one left behind the bars. Meanwhile, Willie, BJ, and Otis are out, living quiet lives. No more flash, no more headlines, just silence, and the weight of who they used to be. Their rise and fall made it to American Gangster, becoming a cautionary tale for a new generation. But their legacy reached even further.
A guy and his friend was riding a motorcycle, actually deliberately ran over my brother. And nothing was dead, but that was the type of stuff that we could expect.
Their story helped spark one of the most iconic films of the early 90s, New Jack City. Behind that film was Barry Michael Cooper, a former journalist turned screenwriter. He had his ear to the streets and his pen on the pulse of Black America. During the peak of the crack era, Cooper was capturing the raw truth, documenting the pain, the hustle, the destruction, especially in places like Harlem, where the epidemic hit like a storm. That realness shaped everything he brought to the screen. New Jack City wasn't just another crime flick. It had grit, it had soul, and most of all, it had truth. Wesley Snipes owned the role of Nino Brown, a smooth-talking, cold-blooded drug kingpin dripping in style and danger. But Barry Michael Cooper didn't stop with New Jack City. In 1994, he followed up with Sugar Hill, another hard-hitting crime drama that once again featured Snipes. This time, diving into the deep emotional story of two Harlem brothers trying to break free from the drug world. That same year, Cooper dropped Above the Rim, a gritty basketball tale starring a young Tupac Shakur. The line between hoop dreams and street life blurred hard in that one. These three films, they became known as Cooper's Harlem Trilogy, a cinematic deep dive into the concrete jungle of New York during a time when the so-called American dream looked more like a gold rope chain and a beeper. What made Cooper's work hit so deep was his mix of street game and high art. He could reference Hemingway or Dostoevsky, then drop dialogue that sounded like it was pulled straight from a Harlem dice game. It was real, it was raw, and it had soul. Critic and filmmaker Nelson George once said that Cooper wasn't just telling stories. He was translating a world onto the big screen. He didn't glamorize the drug life. He showed the truth, the grind, the violence, the pain, the hustle, and the desperation.
He also had a club down there that was
Correct.
What did they call it? A club or juke joint? What did
They call
it?
it a juke joint, cafe.
He painted vivid portraits of young black men chasing fast money, not because they were born to be criminals, but because their options were non-existent. In those neighborhoods, during that time, it was all about survival. Cooper once said, "I wanted to detail their voices, the way the hustlers talked." He even compared his work to The Great Gatsby, only instead of mansion parties and green lights, it was crack corners and street codes. And just like Gatsby, his characters were chasing something, anything bigger than the block. Only this time, the mansions were crack houses, and the green light at the end of the dock, it wasn't hope. It was a gold medallion swinging from a thick rope chain. And it all started with Barry Michael Cooper's journalism back in the mid-1980s. His groundbreaking article, Kids Killing Kids, sent shockwaves through the media world. Published in the Village Voice, the piece exposed how teenagers, some just 13 years old, were deep in the drug game. These kids were making thousands every week, rocking designer drip, flipping beepers, and riding around with cell phones back when having one meant you were rich. And that's where the term New Jack came from. Cooper pulled it straight from the streets and turned it into a movement. That one article, it changed everything. Just weeks after it dropped, Cooper was flying first class to meet Quincy Jones. He'd been tapped to help rewrite a script about Harlem drug boss Nicky Barnes, but instead of sticking to the usual, Cooper flipped the whole story. He brought it into the crack era and birthed a new legend, Nino Brown. And just like that, New Jack City was born. It hit the culture like a bomb, and black cinema would never be the same again. Barry Michael Cooper passed away on January 21st in Baltimore at the age of 66. But even though he's gone, his voice, his vision, and his impact, still loud, still echoing through the streets, the screen, and the stories that follow. If you made it this far, do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with somebody who needs to know the real story. We've got more heat coming, so stay locked in, and we'll see you on the next one.